Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Whiskey and War Stories. This is season 3, episode 11. Raw voices, real battles, PTSD, mental health, and the fight to heal. Ryan, how are you, brother?
I am good. Ready for the holidays.
Yeah?
Yeah, I got my Christmas lights up. It's November 25th right now. I got them up 2 days ago. My neighbors are thoroughly angry.
Why are they angry?
I don't know. I guess they're bah humbug Scrooges. They don't appreciate
really?
Christmas. Yeah.
Okay.
I guess you're supposed to put.
A lot of my neighbors, they start at the very beginning of November.
Oh, man.
Yeah, right. So, and I like it because, it extends the holiday a little bit. The houses are all lit up and people are like streaming lights across the houses. And
yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, same with me. Earlier the better. So,
yeah, I love it. Well, welcome, brother. This is season 3, episode 11. We have 4 more before we put a cap on this season.
Went by quick, yeah.
It went by very quick. I'm excited. We got some new things going for season 4. That we'll throw that out later on. But yeah, so without further ado, as is customary, every episode we dedicate to a fallen hero. Unfortunately, we dedicate every episode to a fallen hero. Seems like it happens so frequently. In this particular episode, it's dedicated to a police officer that just passed away very recently and very close to us in the city of Alhambra. Let me throw a photo up here. So this episode 11, is dedicated to Alhambra police officer Alex Sanders. Alex Sanders was killed in a vehicle crash at 3 a.m. at the intersection of Valley Boulevard and Edgeway Drive in Alhambra. Officers were pursuing a stolen SUV northbound on Edgewood Drive when it collided with Officer Sanders' patrol vehicle driving westbound on Valley Boulevard. Officer Sanders was transported to Los Angeles General Medical Center, where he succumbed to his injuries. The driver and one of the passengers were injured with non-life-threatening injuries, and the third passenger died at the scene. The driver was arrested on suspicion of second-degree murder. Officer Sanders had served with the Alhambra Police Department for 8 months and previously served with the Long Beach Police Department for over a year. He is survived by his fiancée, 2 younger sisters, and a brother. And he's age 28, and he was a police officer for 1 year and 8 months. So this obviously hits close to home because Alhambra is, pretty much one of our neighboring cities in the Foothill area. So, typically when an officer dies that's local, it usually hits those hometown police departments much harder because we all work together and we're all part of a mutual aid together. So it's always tragic and hits home when an officer nearby obviously dies. So to Alex Sanders, rest in peace, brother. Cheers to you.
Rest in peace. Yeah, in the last year or two, Jaime, it's a large amount of local agencies, like within 10, 15, 20 miles of us. I mean, last episode was a Rancho deputy who got shot in the head. You had Baldwin Park, Monte, LAPD. The SOs have lost a lot to traffic accidents. It's horrible.
Yeah, and to be frank with you, I don't like the rate that we're going. Last episode was Deputy Nunez, right?
Yeah.
From SBSO Ranch Cucamonga. And then now, 2 weeks later, we have Officer Sanders from Alhambra that lost his life in a pursuit. And, whenever I hear about these things, officers, cops like you and I, we're not on the streets anymore, Ryan. But I felt the need this past weekend when I was at work to go to all my briefings and tell the cops, especially on my side of the house, because most of them are really young cops, to remind them about this tragic death, and how pursuits are inherently dangerous. It doesn't matter if you're going 30 miles an hour or 120. they're dangerous regardless. And I just want to remind the cops out there that, be careful. And just because the car runs from you doesn't mean that you have to chase it, especially in a place like Pomona where we get in pursuits almost every fucking day. You can catch them tomorrow. So safety is first. So I just had to go to briefing and tell all the cops, because of this. So
yeah, it's important. One story that I tell a lot of cops is when I was a young cop, I was on the SWAT team along with Jaime, but this might be even before you got on. I was working a 2-man car on patrol with a old school SWAT guy, Mel Bird, and I was a young cop and ready to rock and roll. And I wouldn't wear my seatbelt when I was driving back then. And after a traffic stop, he says, "Why don't you wear your seatbelt?" And I said, "Well, I got to get the jump on people. If they come out blasting with a handgun, rifle, whatever, I need to get the extra second." And he's like, "You consider yourself Mr. Officer Safety, yet you're not going to put on a seatbelt. What sense does that make?" Jaime, and as you know, I forget the exact statistics, but way more of us unfortunately die from traffic collisions than a gun battle. And of those gun battles, I don't know how much that extra millisecond I could take my seatbelt out pretty quickly and start firing if I had to. So
yeah, absolutely.
Chances are it's most likely more in danger with a traffic collision. So for those of you that honor us by listening, buckle up and slow down. You need to get to that call. You're no good to your partners if you crash. You're not going to back them up at all. Always have that in mind.
Yeah, definitely. Well said, Ryan. Definitely well said, and I second that. So,
what are you drinking there, Jaime?
Yeah. So this episode, to Officer Saunders, we are drinking. Actually, I'll put it up here for our folks to see. This week we got a bottle of Mackenzie bourbon whiskey. It's 100 proof, bottled in bond. A finely crafted product of Finger Lakes Distilling, New York. So this is a New York distillery. I always like these ones that aren't Kentucky or your typical ones. So this is a different one. So it's got a quick little read here. Mackenzie whiskeys are made from the best ingredients and distilled using old-time techniques, handmade and unchilled filtered. These fine spirits have rich, complex flavors and smooth, colorful finishes. Age minimum of 4 years in American oak, and bottled in bond. I don't know too much about it. I don't want to sound like a fool, but I do know that it has to be a minimum of 4 years in order for it to be a bottled in bond. And the very first thing when I took a drink of it, this was actually off record here before we hit record, but it's probably one of the sweetest tasting bourbon whiskeys I've ever had.
Oh,
but
my.
Not sweet to the point where it's you can only have one glass dessert sweet, but just a fine balance of sweetness. So highly recommended. It's about a $45 price point, really cheap, not going to break the bank. Highly recommended. So Mackenzie.
Wow.
Cheers. Yeah. So cheers to that. And Ryan, what do you got?
Oh my. I am drinking. I don't have the bottle. I just have Buffalo Trace, which is kind of a standard staple. Pretty good. It's not too expensive. Jaime was talking about how he uses it to mix a lot. I could see that. It's not the smoothest of whiskey, but it's all right.
Yeah, definitely a staple.
Yeah.
Definitely
good with an old fashioned. I remember making old fashions with these.
Delicious. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So, Ryan, you want to bring on our guests for episode 11?
I do. So our next guest, Sergeant Gary Gall, who works for the El Monte Police Department. He began his career in the early 1990s. Were you even born then, Jaime?
I was.
After graduating from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Academy. He served with 2 LA County police agencies. See if my memory serves correctly. I believe Bell Gardens or Bellflower, one of the two. That's just from memory from one of our conversations a long time ago. Before dedicating over 31 years to El Monte. Throughout his career, he's worked patrol, FTO, motor officer, detective, and 13 years on the SWAT team, and spent more than 2 decades on the range staff.
Well,
He served as a corporal, gang investigator, and promoted to sergeant for the last 9 years. He was involved in one of the most high-profile gang-related cases in the region, which we'll talk about today. He's a 2-time Medal of Valor recipient. He has earned multiple 10-8-51 pins and has survived an officer-involved shooting while on SWAT. He has seen his department recover from losing 2 great officers killed in the line of duty back in 2022, which we're all very familiar with. Gary is currently recovering from 2 shoulder surgeries. And lastly, he is also a husband and father of 2. So without further ado, let's say hi to my friend, Gary Gall, Sergeant El Monte Police. Gary.
How you doing, guys?
what's up, brother? Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I first met Gary. I was part of a multi-agency AB 109 team, crime suppression team, and we had 2 El Monte guys on our teams at different times. Amazing people, Frankie Valle, and before him, Vic Polanco. Big personality, great guys. But, I just met Gary. I believe at first he was on patrol sergeant, and then he quickly was on the gang unit. So me and Gary did a few capers together, and of course we went to CGIA, the gang conference.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Orange County.
Yep. Of course we had some whiskey and war stories there. We did it the right way. So that's Gary and I know each other. So welcome, Gary.
Thank you.
Yeah, what an impressive bio. And obviously before we went on, I was telling Ryan, just how impressive your bio was, and Ryan was just telling me, Gary's just such a humble guy about it too, and one of those dudes that just you would never know if you met him until you get to know him, but just one of those dudes that never beats his drums, and just a solid street cop. So we're really honored and blessed to have you on here. Definitely.
Here's a little Gary fact. Gary's like an actual true whiskey and war stories fan. He tells me to see our episodes. I'm like, wow, you actually watched us?
I'm flattered, man.
Me too. That's awesome.
I love it. Every time someone tells me that, I'm like, really? You really watch? I can listen to our episodes, and I always get flattered by it. I don't know why. I think it's just kind of giddy or something. I don't know, but
I even bought a challenge coin. I'm still waiting for it though.
Oh, really?
I never sent you a challenge coin.
No, I bought one, and I told Ryan, just hang on to it. I'll meet up with you. We'll grab some.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so
I did forget about that. We shall meet up. All right, Gary. So tell us about
You said it was Downey that I worked at. Was the first agency.
Downey. Okay, one of those agencies.
Real short.
So tell us about your upbringing, Gary, and what eventually led you to law enforcement, and specifically El Monte.
All right. Well, first off, I grew up in the city of Downey. Went to school through elementary, junior high, high school. After high school, I was just going to start working. Actually applied with Downey PD to be a cadet, and their written test was the same as an officer test for the officer, or at least that's what I was told. And of course, I bombed it, so I was thoroughly depressed that I didn't pass it. But I worked for Parks and Rec at the time. Ended up going to a junior college. Played 3 years of football, redshirted, but played football. Buddy of mine actually told me about it, and I was like, I don't know if I want to play anymore. I'm done. But I ended up playing there 3 years. Graduated in June of '87, or I'm sorry, high school in '87. Graduated in '90 in June from college with an AA degree. I took the written test again, like a week or two after I graduated, and passed. And had an oral interview. Went through backgrounds and started the academy in August of '90. So it happened very quick, 2.5 months, which is kind of unheard of. But growing up in the city, and I guess my background was fairly clean at the time, so I was a quick pick for them, and they sent 5 of us through the sheriff's academy at the time.
So from the Sheriff's Academy, you graduated and you went to Downey?
I was working with Downey at the time. A little tidbit, I don't know if you ever remember the training video in the academy of the Pace warehouse shooting. I don't know if they ever talked about that. It's kind of like a Sam's Club or a Costco back in the day. All our guys, the five of us, there's one girl, there's five total, and we met at the police station to carpool to the academy from Downey to Whittier. And I went in the station to pick up some paperwork. And while I was in there, they had speakers throughout the station. And I just heard a bunch of screaming. It was the patrol radio going on. And I just heard a bunch of screaming. So I poked my head into dispatch. And what had happened was there was a takeover robbery at the Pace warehouse right off of Florence by the 605 freeway.
Oh, wow.
They were armed with AK-47s. It was a huge shootout. And I'm listening to this on the radio going on, and we had to drive right down the street past that to get to the academy. And when we got to the academy, we started getting more information. And actually, two of the Downey officers were shot at that time. And suspects ended up getting hit, but they got arrested later, and pretty big caper. So that was my introduction to, when shit hits the fan, and I was still in the academy.
Wow.
But fast forward a little bit, I ended up doing some stupid incident off duty. Ended up had to resign because of it. So that was my first insight of humility and taking a good hard look at your life. Knowing that 21 years old, I had everything going for me. And that was the hardest part. Ended up resigning in lieu of termination, basically, because I was training. So,
is that like just a youthful bad decision type thing?
It was, but it fast forwarded a little bit. It kind of helped me in my career with El Monte. It was a DUI back in 1990. There was a lot of technicalities that happened because during the incident. I don't blame nobody but myself for that. However, it was right when Rodney King was coming out, the case in 1991. And I already knew going to trial to try to beat the case. I already lost my job, that I didn't want to spend that kind of money to put myself through that. Knowing that they were going to, the jury would know I was a police officer for that. So that was, go ahead.
I would say, Gary, how much time from the time you got the DUI to you got hired with El Monte?
It was 3 years and 8 months.
It's pretty quick.
It took a while. Trust me, I applied at a lot of agencies. I talked to a lot of background investigators, got shut down from the beginning, and I understood it. But I went back to school. It was funny because I went to Cal State Dominguez Hills, and when I got hired at El Monte, I was 5 classes away from getting my degree, and I never went back until 5 years ago. So, and finished my degree. But
wow,
school was not my forte, put it that way.
Yeah.
So how did you end up at was El Monte just someone that decided to give you a shot, or did you have some type of connection there?
Well, actually, the funny story is I was at Pomona Fairgrounds. They were doing a job expo, a police job expo, and they had a table set up, and I filled out an interest card and I dropped it off and didn't think nothing of it. Got a call back not too long after. They waived because I had my post certificate already from graduating.
Sure.
Which was, to me, I always say that was my golden ticket. That was the Willy Wonka golden ticket, which helped me. I didn't have to take the written test. I went straight into the oral interview. They went through the interview process. They called me back, went through backgrounds with them, took the polygraph, all that stuff. And then I got called in, and it's funny because I didn't know anybody in El Monte at the time. I had no connection, nothing. Ended up one of my good friends from high school, actually junior high school that I wrestled with in high school, was an actually officer, like had a year on when I started there. So I knew somebody, which was kind of nice. But when they called me in for a second interview, and which was odd to me because I've been through so many interviews, and they talked about it was a captain, a lieutenant, and the training sergeant, and they did a full nother interview with me, and then they took me out. They had me sit outside. They had a conversation. They called me back in, and they basically said, "Hey, we're going to give you a chance. We know you screwed up in the past, but we want to give you a chance." And I said, "The only problem is I've been out for longer than 3 years, so your post expires." I said, "I'm on a waiting list," and they said, "We already made a call today, and we got you in the class." So they said, "Don't disappoint us." And I said, "I will see you in 3 weeks when I graduate," and the rest is history.
So, wow! So they bent over for you, huh? I mean, that's great.
They did, and I thank them. I mean, I was just happy. I mean, my bank account was down to 3 digits. It was pretty small when I got hired, so it was very nice to get that second chance. And I let guys know that, hey, it can happen to any of us. So,
persistence, man. That's good. Yeah. With El Monte, I tell people that if I ever didn't work for Pomona, I would work for El Monte, because when I used to work there once a week on that team, and I was just so impressed. Their culture is just super, almost like Glendale. I said the same thing about Glendale, but it's true. Just super old school, as it's like good old fashioned police work. They love being cops out there. They all look good. They wear the uniform well. Just really good culture. Almost every time we went down there with our team, we got in a foot pursuit. What I really liked is, Jaime, how many gangs do we have in Pomona? About?
Well, all of them, including ones that have died and kind of came back in the 20s.
Yeah. So in El Monte, I was surprised to find out really like one major gang. It's EMF. And it's really cool as a gang guy. For me, working once a week, you just really get engrossed in knowing them. It's really a fun cat and mouse game, which I enjoyed. So kudos to El Monte PD for sure.
Yeah, and if I could add on to that, I've also said the same thing, that if there's a department out there that mirrors Pomona, very similar, as very close partnering agency, without a doubt, it's El Monte. The culture is the same, very family oriented department. A lot of very hard charging cops doing police work, old school, but in a good way. So very, very similar. And I also said the same thing, that if Pomona wasn't a home, then El Monte would probably be a very, very close second for sure.
And a lot of like you guys have a lot of homegrown officers. We have handful, and there's still a handful that live in the city, but there's a lot that grew up through the school system and maybe moved out, but had the connection and family members in the city too.
Yeah. So, and a handful of your cops have been on this podcast, so there's definitely something to say about that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So kudos to El Monte.
Thank you.
So Gary, we know about you now. Tell us about Gary, the young police officer. What drove you as a cop? What were you like as a cop? What interests did you have as far as at work?
When I first started, my interest was stolen vehicles. Oh, first off, I'll say, when I started, we'd go 10-8, 2-man car, one radio, not the unit radio, but one portable radio between us sometimes. Not all the time, but usually I'm the youngest guy on graveyard shift, and you'd go 10-8, one radio. So it's like, do you chase them? Do you have the radio? Do you use the mic in the car? That was one of my things. We didn't have the computers in the car to run plates. A lot of it was just repetition, looking for certain cars, certain people that didn't fit like they belonged in certain cars. I had a knack for that, which was kind of cool. I always my goal was to try to get at least 2 in a shift, in a 12-hour shift. I only did it one time. But it was pretty cool. But one was before LoJack. I think it was called Teletrack. Before your time, probably. But Teletrack, they could track a car by looking on a computer, and they would dispatch. They'd call our dispatch and say, "Hey, the car is here. It's moving. It's this speed. It's this street." Well, they didn't tell you there's about a 10-15 second delay. So you were heading to that area, but you had to be ahead of it. So it was kind of cool doing that. I didn't have much experience being around gangs, and obviously I was thrown into that culture right away. Being in the city, and I know we're gonna talk about it in a little bit. One of the most, I would say, um, murders that very famous. You go to a gang conference. I went to, I think it was the ICI detective course down in San Diego, and they take you on a part of your class is doing surveillance. You guys remember that, or you guys go through that? And one of the guys sitting with us was a San Diego detective, and we started talking in the back seat, and he's like, "You were on that? You were there?" And he just started drilling me with questions. I thought I was getting interviewed by him. It was kind of, but down in San Diego, him being as a gang cop, asking those kind of questions, and it was pretty cool. But
so, tell us, Maxon murders, right?
Yes.
Yeah, tell us about that.
So it was actually the birth date sticks in my mind because it was my older sister's birthday that night. I was working, and I think you guys have them too, the alert tones when a hot call comes out. They don't use them too much anymore. But I was with my partner who, mind you, I started with El Monte in 94 in November. This was April of 95. I was off training. My beat partner, we were doubled up in a car. We had the whole north end of our city, basically anything north of the 10 freeway. And we were handling a party call, and they hit the alert tone. And I looked at my partner and I was like, "Hey, this is going to be our beat." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" And I go, "I don't know. I just got a feeling." Sure enough, call comes out. Possible injured victim, shots fired. And they give the address, and I'm like, "Holy shit. We're at the 4,000 block." I'm sure, Ryan, you remember Zamora Park. You hear the park. We were at the 4,000 block of the next street over, and the call was at the high 3,800 block on the next street. I mean, if I had a good arm, I could have chucked a rock and probably hit the house where this crime went down. From the time the dispatcher started talking, we went down the street, made a turn, and we went 97 when the dispatcher finished giving out all the info. So, it just the way it happened. It was crazy. But El Monte is very similar, like you said, as Pomona. Houses have 2, sometimes 3 houses on the lots. They're pretty deep. They gave us an address, but we found out later that the child, who was our reporting party, went to the neighbor's house. He was, I think, 8 years old at the time. Reported that his mom was injured and she was bleeding. So we actually parked in front of the house where the crime occurred, and went down the next driveway over, went all the way down the back to the house, and he was telling us, "Hey, what happened?" And I could see that he was covered in blood. He had blood on him. And I'm thinking, man, this kid he just seen something pretty bad. And he's pointing to the fence across the little backyard from us. And we walk over there with our flashlights, and we see one victim down outside the door. It looked like he had thrown up, is what we thought. But he had actually taken a headshot and was dead right outside the door. The door was open a couple inches. There were, I think, 4 of us total at the time. Made some announcements. We made entry into the open door, and you could see some object or a person laying down probably 5-6 feet inside the door. Ended up being the victim, the kid who called or told the neighbors to call. It was his mother who had been shot. We see her down, and then probably a couple feet away from her found out later, I believe she was 6 or 8 month old, a child. And then right next to that child was I believe maybe 5 years old that was also shot. And then across the room, it was one huge room. Across the room was another person that was shot. So it was a total of 5 people that were shot. But there was one child still in the room that was walking around in a circle, just in a daze. Just couldn't imagine what he saw or what he was thinking at the time. We got him out, but the guy that was across the room, I tell this to guys I worked with, the guy that was across the room, he was shot in the back of the head So everything was up close and personal, that these people were shot. But there was a cigarette laying on the bed right next to him where he was shot. And the cigarette ash was only maybe a quarter of an inch. So that's how fresh it was, the crime had occurred, So from the time we got the call, the time we went in and saw everything. And then obviously months later, everything started playing out, finding out who was involved and stuff like that. So, but then coming to find out that there was a takeout vehicle at Zamora Park that we probably passed on the way there or just missed them. That was loaded with 3 or 4 gang members that were supposed to take us out.
Oh, geez.
So for whatever reason, we missed them by that split second, and it obviously didn't happen. But I mean, I'm 31 years later, I can still vividly picture that incident.
So Gary, there's actually books written on this for a lot of our followers that aren't familiar with this very famous murders that happened, and there are books written about some books that make reference to the Maxim Road murders. So it's a very significant incident that happened in the IE, especially El Monte. And first a comment, then a question. And the first comment is you had said, and it's a little gruesome, but I'll be specific. You had said that when you first pulled up, you had seen a victim, I think, at the door, and it looked like they had thrown up. Yeah. So for most of our followers have probably never seen a murder before. When a victim is shot in the head, the brain matter, it will look like throw up. So that's to clarify, like your reference, right? The throw up, it looks like somebody threw up, where in fact it's actually brain matter as a result of the traumatic gunshot wound. And then the second question I had for you is, at the time, did you have kids?
No.
You didn't have kids at the time?
No.
And you said that you still remember this 31 years later. Like, what about this incident really stuck out? And was there anything specific that bothered you?
Just the innocence of the kids that had nothing to do with it. And you read later on that the guys that did the murder broke the code of killing kids because they had nothing to do with it. That was probably the hardest part. There was guys with many years on that were there on scene that showed up, and I remember our watch commander coming out, and as soon as he made his notifications, he got in his car and took off. He was done for the night.
Wow.
There was one officer that years on that went over in the bushes and was throwing up. I mean, it was just something you don't wish on anybody to see. So.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, these things happen too often in our career. Like, what do you find as some coping mechanisms for stuff like that, especially for something so traumatic as a child being murdered or even being exposed or seeing that? I mean, it's tragic enough when we go to babies that go into cardiac arrest or stop breathing, or the rare cases where babies drown and they get involved in car accidents. But to actually be murdered is completely different. I mean, it's just, the realm is completely different. I mean, how do you even cope with something like that?
Well, I would say I'm thankful I didn't have kids at the time. But I think our mindset, I mean, I only had 4 months on besides my other time before that, but you compartmentalize those things. And I'm sure they're stored with all my other fatal traffic collisions and other stuff I've seen. But that one just sticks out. Obviously, there's a book about it where there's pictures of the scene of the one victim I told you about that was outside. There's that picture that refreshes it. I mean, heck, my name was even in that book. That you read it, and I didn't even know about it. The book coming out yet, and somebody goes, "Hey, did you know your name's in this book?" And I'm like, "Really? Oh yeah, turn to this chapter." And I'm like, "Holy crap!" I'm like, "I wish they would have let me know."
Yeah. And what's so significant about that is, and I guess to put it into perspective for everybody, is you don't forget, as a police officer, you don't forget about something like that, right? You get exposed to in our careers, we've been exposed to, how many murders. I couldn't even count how many murders I've been to in my career. And as bad as this may sound, I don't remember a lot of those murders. I don't remember the victims. A lot of them were gang crimes and those type of things. And I don't remember those victims. But I can tell you there was 2 in my career. 2 children were murdered. The first of these was Ethan Esparza. You remember that, Ryan? Where Conan worked that case in like 2006 or something.
Absolutely.
And the second one was Jonah Wang, the young boy over off of like 8th and Waters in that area, I think.
That was horrendous.
Yeah, they're just so significant. I remember, and I can't remember, who else I talked to in those incidents, but one of them I had, the Jonah Wang murder, I had a big involvement in that. I was on gangs at the time, but to your point, those 2 incidents stick out in my mind. I remember those names. Those murders happened years ago, but I still remember the kids' names, Ethan Esparza and Jonah Wang, because when it involves somebody so innocent like a child, right? We don't forget those type of things. So we definitely.
Jaime, not to take away from this interview because it's amazing, but can you just give the listeners a brief description of the Joseph Wang murder? Because that still gets me. How it happened.
Yeah, right. I can't even remember the specifics of it. I remember the Jonah Wang. I remember that he was adopted. He lived off of like 8th Street and
Hamilton.
It was some 8th or Hamilton, that area. Some gangsters were driving by and they were targeting somebody else. Gosh, I'm not sure if it was in a house or in a vehicle. But they fired, and I think it was inside the house. They were looking for another target, and the Jonah Wang, and I think he was 8 years old too. I believe he was 8. And he was murdered. And I remember that at the time, everything stopped. At the time, the chief, the command staff was like, "This is priority." Those were very long nights. We stayed up. We worked a lot of hours, very long nights, and subsequently ended up finding the vehicle at a trailer park. And I remember we had set up there for hours waiting for it to go mobile. And but we had eventually taken the suspect into custody. But I remember that at the end of it, just the relief I felt because of the stress and the long hours and, the trauma of a young kid getting killed. And, in those incidents, you don't think about working the long hours and staying up late and waking up early and doing surveillance. You don't think about those things when it comes to, something so traumatic as a kid. You just want to find the person that did it and bring him to justice, I guess. So,
he, the suspect shot at the house and the round went through the window, through the wall.
Yes.
And it hit the poor kid, I believe, in the head as they were in the kitchen, like eating dinner. And my son's 8-year-old right now. I can't even fathom it. And another sinister fact, not an interesting fact, but the suspect, he actually ended up doing a drive-by at the same house like 3 or 4 times after that, like within days. He had some mental issues.
Yeah.
And of course, we had surveillance, but we missed him one time. I remember one time I was working the case on one of the teams as well, surveillance. And one of the nights that we couldn't put someone there, he happened to do it. And just one of those that you're up at 2 a.m. Anyway.
Wow. Yeah.
But Gary, one thing that stands out from your resume is 2 Medal of Valors, huh?
Yeah.
What happened?
I say it's part of the job. One of them was the shooting with on the SWAT team.
Tell us about that one.
You want that one right now? Okay.
Yeah.
So it was 2000 and I believe it was 8, 2 days before Christmas. I'm off, and that's back when we had the PageNet pagers. If you remember that, we all SWAT had the pagers and send those cool text messages. You could, and got a text, "Hey, barricaded suspect, start rolling in," and I'm like, "All right." So I jump in the car, driving into work. And apparently, while I was driving towards the 71 freeway, I passed the LAPD motor officer who didn't like that, and he pulled up alongside of me. And I was like, "Hey," showed my badge. I go, "Hey, I got my SWAT. We got a call out, and I'm coming in." He's like, "All right, I said, I owe you one, and took off his credit card. But you driving in, you start getting a little more information. Come to find out, patrol got a call of a citizen who basically saw a guy walking with his kid or a child that something just didn't seem right with this child and the guy that was walking with him. They didn't look like they fit together for some reason. So it was kind of a welfare check, I guess. Our first officer goes 97 within pretty quick by himself at the time. And the next officer hadn't got there yet. Sees the guy walking. The suspect looks over his shoulder, sees the unit pulling up, immediately produces a handgun out of his waistband or his pocket and puts it to the kid's head. You know, kind of an oh shit moment. Next officer pulls up as the suspect's trying to walk. It's a strip mall, so there's a bunch of restaurants. There's a couple restaurants and some businesses. Suspect tries to get into one of the businesses. They're holding the door shut, keeping him out. He turns around, walks back through the parking lot. Officer who's on the SWAT team was the second officer on scene. There was just so much chaos. The background, the backdrop wasn't right for him to take a shot with him holding a gun to the kid's head. He knew it. And if anybody, I tell you, I would have put money that he could have probably done it. A good shot and took the guy out, but he just didn't feel comfortable with the background. The guy kept walking, ended up barricading himself in a bathroom of a little Chinese fast food and barricades himself in the bathroom. They secure the area. They're dialogue with him. They're calling. They have some patrol guys that are actually SWAT or negotiators. They'll roll out there. They start getting some more information. The guy basically claims, "Hey, I'm on America's Most Wanted. This is my name." And you know, you think, yeah, right. Why would a guy from America's Most Wanted, come to El Monte? So the desk officer gets on the computer, starts pulling shit up, and looks up and sends a picture to the scene and like, "Hey, is this the guy you're talking about?" And they're like, "Yep, that's him." So this guy ended up 4 years earlier, killed his girlfriend who he had a child with, which was the child that was with him. Killed her. She was going through. She was going to break up with him. He had a drug problem. She never showed up to work. Co-worker said, "Hey, can you do a welfare check?" I think it was Hawthorne PD. They go out there, found out that she was beaten to death with a barbell in her house. So for 4 years, this guy was on the run. For whatever reason, 2 days before Christmas, he decided to show up in El Monte. Probably came to our bus depot and got off the bus and was going to do some shopping, I guess. And that's when the caller called in. We got called in, obviously. I was one of the first officers from SWAT to get there. I grabbed our truck. I brought it there. We started relieving the patrol guys that were in this area of the restaurant. Mind you, it's probably, I don't know, I don't think I've ever been in your guys' watch commander's office, but it was probably, if it was maybe an 8x8 room, that's about all we were working with, between where the suspect was in the bathroom, a little hallway, and it was a small quarter of where we were dealing with this guy. He had been in there for a couple hours through negotiations. He made a comment that I heard him say, "I'm getting tired, and when I get tired, I'm going to start shooting." We knew he had one weapon because he pointed it at the child that was with him. Coming to find out later, he actually had two weapons. He had a revolver and a handgun. On my part, I didn't get a picture of what the suspect looked like, so I didn't have that mindset yet. However, one of our senior guys on the SWAT team told our team leader, said, "Hey, because he would open the door a little bit and look outside and he would try to see where we were at, basically." And he said, "Hey, if he opens the door again," I'm taking a shot. We already knew he was armed. He goes, "I'm taking a shot." So door popped open. He fired a couple rounds. Actually, come to find out later, the first round hit him through the mouth, through and through, and ended in the towel dispenser up on the wall. He was actually hit multiple times, and the door shut. One of our other officers had fired, but he took a knee to get a better angle for the shooting. We trained back then, if you take a knee, you're injured, you're down. So I hear in my head from our team leader, hey, we called him Gator because he liked to eat a lot. He was our breacher, and back, but he was our I was a backup breacher, so I always worked with Jack. And when I heard, hey, Jack's down, my mindset is we got an officer down. I'm gonna step over, get him out of the way. Well, Jack is probably 6 foot, 250 pounds. He's a big dude, and I'm looking at the other guys. I'm like, there's no way these other guys are gonna be able to grab him with all his gear and get him out. Well, at the same time, we popped the door again. Suspect presented himself, and he was sitting on the ground of the bathroom. I didn't know he'd already been hit, and he's sitting there pointing a handgun directly at me. And I had a MP5 at the time. I was in at a 3-round burst. I was only able to get 1 round off because the door shut so quick. But I focused right on the gun. The threat, I saw it, came up, and I fired the 1 round. Officer next to me, he fired. So we had the guys fire from before. We had another volley of fire go in, and then we were going to throw a flashbang in there to distract him, to rescue the child. Door pops open again. I fired 2 more rounds, and then the door shut. We said, and mind you, from the time the first round, we didn't have body cameras at the time, so this was all on the little cassette tapes, the micro cassette tapes we used to carry. They said it was about 37 seconds, I believe, the whole time of from the first round to the last round. Flashbang went off. We got the door open, small area. I was the first one through the door. I saw the suspect down. He was behind the toilet, and I saw the child sitting up there looking at ended up being his father.
Wow.
Staring at his dad. I picked him up, turned around, and it reminded me of a scene from a bathroom in New York where all the smoke is blowing and trash from, and I'm looking around, and because the guy had a bunch of newspapers in there, so there was trash blowing around from the flashbang going off. There was still the smoke in the room, the smell of gunfire, the smell of the flashbang going off. I grabbed the child, ran him out to our medic. Come to find out later that he was hit with some shrapnel in his groin area. And then the suspect was deceased at the scene. So that was quite an incident. There was 4 of us that were involved in the shooting, but there was probably 8 guys there. But after I dropped the child off and I already knew the suspect was down, for my own mindset, I walked back into to the scene, and I stood where I was standing, and I took a look around, and I looked above me, and there was a bullet hole above my head in the stained glass window behind me.
Wow.
Now, I stood up, and if I would have stood up, that bullet would have been probably right about here.
Oh, jeez.
So luckily, we trained with the MP5, you get small, keep close, and I'm thinking God was watching me that day. So, but
Talk about
oh yeah.
That's like your standard atypical academy school scenario, man. Hostage with kids, tight quarters, flashbang, headshot. That's amazing. And then I'm not a gun guy, but that's a perfect scenario for MP5. Jaime was one of the few guys in my whole SWAT career that carried an MP5, and probably for that reason.
I still have it. It's in the trunk. It's in the trunk of my car right now. Yeah, I still have it. It is a phenomenal gun. So I'm curious, Gary. After these OISs, the public, the community sees these headlines, but the officer faces investigations, OIS investigations, and family conversations. What was the hardest part for you about this OIS?
Well, we all went back to our SWAT room after. We got in. We had to wait there to be interviewed. They had to count your magazines. Well, shit, you're carrying an MP5 with a 30, and I had a suppressor on mine. So, you think of a shooting, everything's slow motion already. you can't hear the rounds anyways with a suppressor. And I said, and you said, oh, I don't know how many rounds. Guys will say, I don't know how many rounds I fired. I fired, 3 or 4, and it could have been 6. And I'm like, no, I fired 3. I remember 1, and I did a 2-round burst, and you got to empty your whole magazine of, I only carried 29 because I didn't want that extra spring in it. So I always did 29.
Right.
So I counted out, and I'm like, there's my 26 rounds, What made it easier for me was knowing, 1, he was wanted, and 2, he was armed, and I saw the threat myself, and it was either me or him. And I'm like, it's not my time. I can tell you that. That was my mindset. But you don't realize how your training kicks in to getting the way you carry the gun, to your position, to, you could be full auto and you could still get 1 round off if you had to,
Right.
and all that training over and over and over. And I think that was just the easiest thing for me. I think about now as like, hey, that, a child got injured, but, he's still alive, and we rescued him from the situation he was in. So, that was probably the easiest part for me, knowing that we took a bad guy out that obviously people have been looking for many years. So
I'm curious, Gary, if I was a young cop and I heard a SWAT guy get in that type of shooting like you did, I'd be in awe the next time I saw you. What was it like going back to work?
It wasn't a real big deal. I mean, it was because it was, like I said, it was more, I think it was more the famous part of, holy shit, that TV show, America's Most Wanted. Somebody came to our city and we took out the threat, and we saved a kid right before Christmas. That was the big thing. So.
Is that you, as you're looking at the photo, is that you on the left?
That's me on the left. Yep. That's our old school gear. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Who's on the right, Gary? He looks familiar.
That's Jeff Gergel.
Yeah. Yep.
He was a pilot. Now he flies for the news, flying the news guys around, doing all their pursuits for him. So, but yeah.
Some hardcore looking dudes there, man. So, Gary, one.
That one they gave us the Medal of Valor for that one and a unit citation for our whole team. But that was, to me, it was, that's what we do on SWAT. It wasn't like you asked about, the getting the medal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was looking in my man cave here. I was like, yeah, it's just a thing I'm supposed to wear on my shirt. I've never, posted it, put it up. I mean, to me, it wasn't, I don't know. I didn't take it that way. So.
It's very humble of you, man. But we go through this job, and you train and train and train for that shot, and just the psychological stuff you go through right before that shot, and for you to perform, you did great, man. Maybe you don't hear that all the time, but you did great.
You know what's crazy is as I'm listening to Gary talk, he said something that's so common in our profession that I don't even think we take a second to really reflect on it. But he said, you were talking about the gun, the bullet hole over your head, Gary, and you said, well, it's your response was, it's just not my time. It just wasn't my time.
Yep.
And what other career says that about what they do, right? When they go to work, right? When you work at a grocery store, you don't say that. When you work at a restaurant, you don't say that. When you work in countless industries, right? Most folks don't say that, but I feel like it's a really common occurrence in our profession, and we have no choice but to normalize it.
Yeah.
Right. Because what's the other option? The other option is, we break down and we don't handle the situation, right? And then it prevents us from being able to keep moving forward and doing our job. So kind of a segue into this, and I still want to know about the second shooting that you had, but how do you cope?
I only had one shooting. The other one I can tell you the color. That was a quick story if you want to hear that one real quick.
Gotcha. Okay. How do you cope though? What's some coping mechanisms that you personally have adopted that's really helped you through your career?
I would say first, not surrounding yourself by the officers you work with. That's a good friend of mine from Long Beach. That was actually when I got the award. But you surround yourself with that people that aren't involved or don't have as much knowledge of the, friends I've grown up with since grade school, high school, going to church, your family, I think plays the biggest part in keeping yourself. Because if not, you're going to be around all the guys you work with. Hey, let's go out, let's go have some drinks, and it just, I mean, it was like after the shooting. I remember coming home and I'm like, holy shit, it's Christmas time. I got to finish my shopping because I was at Target when the call came out. I was like, so the next day I had to go finish my shopping, and I went to lunch by myself, and I was like, all right, I'm good. I had that comfort knowing that I saved somebody and I took a bad guy out that shouldn't even have been around in the first place. So, but I think that's important, is to surround yourself with good people, and just to talk to you normally, as opposed to talking police stuff or that. I think that's important, because we all sit around and tell war stories, but there's the time and a place to do all that also.
Yeah, I mean, there's countless episodes you can listen to where we talk about that as well. Like just having friends maybe that aren't cops, or that really they kind of ground you, and kind of bring you back down to, I don't know, maybe a sense of reality a little bit, right? Because when you're so caught up in the minutia of police work, there could be a tendency to sort of stray away from, right, reality sometimes, so to speak.
Yeah.
And somebody who's been in the career as long as you have, obviously knows that. So, well, tell me about this second shooting. There was a second shooting that you were involved in. What were the circumstances behind that?
2022, 2 El Monte police officers were killed while responding.
Oh, that you're talking. Okay, I got you.
Is that something you want to play, Ryan, or what was that?
No, it was an accident.
No. Sounded good though.
Yeah, I was doing my research as we speak.
So that was back in 2022 when 2 of our officers were killed, handling a call at a motel. I was the graveyard sergeant. This happened at, I believe, around a little after 5 in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
However, obviously I got off work in the morning. I saw both those, one Mikey, he was the acting sergeant that day, and Joseph, who was one of our newer officers, great kid, came in, and I believe he was on overtime that day, and was sitting across from me and just had the smile on his face, was happy to be at work. And I saw both of them because I always kind of give a rundown what our night was the night before.
Sure.
Said goodbye to him, took off, went home, got up in the morning, or in the afternoon, I should say. Was carpooling with one of my partners, and we were driving in on the 10 freeway, and I got info that shit's not looking good, and they were both transported to the hospital. So I was like, didn't have much circs. I was passing through West Covina at the time, so I wasn't too far from work. So I'm like, all right, we're going to get to work. I'm going to grab my team as soon as they come in, get dressed up. We're going to go out and start, helping out at the crime scene, whatever they need. That got shut down real quick. Said, hey, we got other agencies that are handling. It's pretty bad. Come to find out that both of them had passed away. We found out probably about a half hour apart from the first one. They broke the news to us. Obviously that rocked us. And then they called us in again. It's like, no, we got to tell you some more news, So it was tough.
What,
especially being a supervisor of the next shift that's supposed to start that night.
What effect did that have on you, and what effect did it have on the department?
Well, my first effect was that night, I told Ryan about this. I was like, that walk from county hospital to the coroner's office, it's probably a couple hundred yards, if that. But it's like the Green Mile, man. That is one long stretch that you're walking, not just one officer, but two officers. But then you're thinking, man, we got to go back to work. We got a job to do. We got people to protect. We got a citizen, and it's like, how do you deal with that? How do you get your guys head in the game, knowing what just happened? We had an officer who was in backgrounds ready to get hired by us. And that person's like, you know what? I'm going to stay where I'm at. I'm good. And it's like, can you blame them? So, but I called Ryan on my way to work. I was like, dude, how do you guys do it? I said, you guys had to do it with, because the most recent one was Casillas. And he's like, because I knew he was a sergeant. And he's like, man, you got to tell him, hey, this is what we do for our living. This is our job, and your tactics, your professionalism, and you go out and you do it.
So what did you tell your folks that night? Like going into briefing and stuff. Like what was the message that you sent to them?
Well, we didn't. I want to say we had other cities cover our city for a few days. So once we got my whole team back and we went in, I just told them, what I mentioned is like, hey, we signed up for a job that's dangerous, and it could happen, but you use your tactics, you use everything you've learned. You learn the little cues, the little things you might see, you hear, you smell, you got to take all that into effect, get as much info as you can. And we have a job to do, obviously I had to go to some counseling for it, which they were at our station already. So made it easy. But there was people that refused to go. And you're like, hey, just come in here. And I grabbed a couple people and they thanked me later for going to listen to the counselor. So
did this affect you at all? Because I know you had talked about you'd been in the OIS and had been to these Maxon Road murders, and maybe this was earlier in your career, and it just hearing you talk about it, I could be wrong, but it seemed like you were able to cope with those really well. And again, maybe it was because you were young. I don't know the case, but as you kind of talk about the Almani officers that were killed, it seems like it's had more of an effect on you. And why would you say that is? If in fact I'm correct, I could be wrong, but
I would say the effect on them was, one, you work with them, but you see videos on the news, on Instagram, whatever that where basically the news stuff where they talk about officers were killed. And there was that one year, there was, they were taking out officers left and right, shooting. And it's like, man, when is this going to stop? And I'm like, I always said to myself, I'm glad this shit never happened in Almani, because it's like, these are the guys I work with. It's never going to happen to us. And then it did. So I think that was probably the hardest part. I still get choked up about it. So,
yeah.
Gary, I vividly remember when you called me, like you just described, and Gary called me and asked me for advice. Like, what do I tell my troops here? I don't know what to say. And I was taken aback because Gary is a lot more senior, a lot more years on the job than I do. And he's calling to ask me this advice. But unfortunately, because we've had too many more officer involved deaths at Pomona than I care to want. But I do remember telling Gary that is, you have to direct your troops and say, we have a job to do, and stiff upper lip and let's do the task at hand, which is important. But you talk about we're always learning and evolving. And I should have told Gary, you should have also told them, don't forget to look after yourselves. It's okay to be hurt right now. As a sergeant, Gary, I should have told you it's okay to be vulnerable when you speak to them. I didn't tell you that. I think that component is just as important now that I realize it.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. Horrible. Yeah. We were all taken aback to have two officers taken in one incident is just horrendous. How's the department now?
We're coming back. Soon after that, we lost our chief due to an illness. So, it was like he kept it from us. He didn't want us to think about that at the same time, I guess. And so, it was, it's less than, I want to say 6 months after this service. We were doing another service for our chief at the time. So, it's just like you get punched once, you get down, you come back up and you get hit again. So
Ben Laurie, right?
yeah, Ben Lowry, correct. Yeah. And I can remember him when he lateraled to our department. And I remember him as a trainee. I mean, the guy he just had a good sense of humor, and I always joke with him. So he just had that sense of humor of dealing with people of all people. And I can remember when he came from the sheriff's department, he just was he'd put quotes on in the briefing room. He'd write quotes up there all the time, and it's like, did you read that from a book? He goes, no, I just put it up there. I did it myself. Kind of like things to think about for the day or stuff like that. So, but yeah, it was, I mean, it's tough. There's a lot of the newer officers that don't, they knew what happened, but they weren't involved in it. They didn't know Mikey or Joseph. So it didn't hit as hard, but both those guys grew up in our city and have family ties to the city. So that's what made it real tough. So.
Gary, last season, we had Chief Fisher on one of our episodes, and he was talking about some of the mental health programs and some of the wellness things that your police department has adopted and has been doing, even as a result of the deaths that you guys have experienced. But that was maybe a year ago, maybe even longer. What's it look like now? How are people coping? How are some of these programs working? And it's obviously a perspective from a chief is different from a field line supervisor, like a sergeant that's that's in the field still with their folks. So how's all that looking now?
Well, my disclaimer is I've been off for several months for injuries that happened at work. But I know they've always had the service for counseling where it's anonymous. You can go talk to them. I'm assuming if you need more than, say, the 10 allotted, they're not going to question it. There's a wellness. I can't think of the exact name of the company, but there's a person at our station that does whether it's meal plans, stretching, working out your knots in your shoulder, your arm, your back, just trying to keep people healthy and keeping them in the field and or at their desk doing detective stuff. They're giving us the option or the resources out there to use them, and people are actually taking them to do it. It's not looked down upon like you're weak or you go see this person, or you don't really talk about it, but people know that you go to counseling, or it's not a big deal to me anymore. It's not, but when I first started, it was kind of unheard of. You'd ever, come on.
Well, and that was going to be my next question, because someone that's had a tenure like you have, where you grew up in a law enforcement culture that you didn't talk about feelings, and it was very taboo, and it was seen as a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
Now the pendulum has swung on the other side, and we find that mental health and wellness, to take care of those things, is really important in our career. As a sergeant now, how do you advocate that stuff, or do you as a sergeant?
I mean, I've told people about it that I've talked to them. One of the things I always like to do is, your dispatchers, I think your dispatchers are at your station in their own little area. I always tell them, man, I could never do your job. Your job is, I wouldn't want your job. I'm like, well, I wouldn't want your job. I'm like, well, perfect. I can do my job. You do yours. Because
Right.
I said,
It works out.
I couldn't do it. And you're stuck in a little room. You're hearing phone calls. You're giving us calls, putting us out on stuff, but they never hear the outcome. Oh yeah, we arrested somebody here at the station, or a critical incident, that is a shit show out there, and they have no clue how it ended, except somebody went to jail or whatever it is. I always like to go in there and debrief them, and let them know, which gave them some closure. Because I mean, some of the stuff they hear and see, or they hear on the radio or talking to people on the phone, is a lot different than we see it firsthand, so they can only imagine to me what we're dealing with. So I actually went to counseling, group counseling with our dispatchers when our officers were killed, just because I was like, they're part of us too, and I want to hear what they have to say. I want to be a part of it all. And I've sent people, as a sergeant, I've sent people to counseling that saw some pretty traumatic stuff, and it's a matter of picking up on some cues that a call they went to and saw something pretty crazy. And I called my captain. I'm like, hey, we got to send this guy to talk to somebody. He was, seeing some pretty bad shit, and never questioned it. And the officer thanked me later. And it wasn't looked upon, oh, you're a wuss, or, oh, you had to go talk to somebody. Right. So it wasn't a big deal. And, they survived. And the goal is, we want to get to that 30-year mark. Well, now I think it's a little longer for some of the guys. Right. But we want to get you to that finish line, and if there's a couple hiccups along the way, you fix them, and you're going to carry on. So,
Gary, what's some of the signs that you've seen, the cops that you've referred to counseling, what's some of the signs that you picked up on that they were showing that led you to believe something was not right?
Oh, one, I knew the call on that it was on, because I was an acting supervisor of traffic at the time, and just the look on his face and him talking about it, like 100 miles a minute. He just kept talking about it. I'm like, hey, slow down. You saw some pretty gruesome shit. Even the traffic guys, it's like, you see accidents and you're like, hey, it's not a big deal to go talk to somebody, but a lot of it's just, they're out of their normal self, I guess it would be. And it's a small department like you guys. You can pick up on cues when you see somebody. They're distant, or, and you just talk to them. Hey, it's out there. You give them the number. You can't force them to go. But a lot of times you explain to them, hey, it's out there. It's not a big deal. I've done it before, so, it's an option for us. And it's actually good to talk to somebody who has that education, who has that, they've never been through the crap we have, but they can still talk you through it. So that's how I dealt with it.
No, I think, most of the world thinks that, police sergeants, right? We supervise our cops in the field, and we make sure they're going to calls, and we make sure they're following policy, and we have oversight on pursuits and those type of things. But there's a whole nother side to that, right? Oh, yeah. And is it your job as a sergeant to also monitor our cops' mental health? And if so, why is that important?
Well, they work for you on your shift, and you're responsible for them. And if they do something that can get them in trouble, it's going to fall back on you. And we don't always know what somebody's going on, what something's got going on at home, whether it's, they had a newborn and they've been up all night, or, hey, I'm tired, or I was in court all day, or, there's all kinds of stuff, but you got to be aware of what's going on to an extent in someone's life, I guess. Not prying too much, but you kind of know somebody, and you can, and you pick up on that. But to me, it can fall back on the sergeant if you, right. You don't want someone showing up to work that's been drinking, and then they show up to work, because one, they crash a car, liability, and all the other stuff. But sure. maybe they have a problem. Maybe, they're going through crap and they don't know how to deal with it. And if you can squash it fairly soon, or before it gets out of hand, or they do something tragic, then you're ahead of the game.
And in your several years of service, you've obviously known or seen cops that have had issues before. They're dealing with personal issues before. And oftentimes, do you see that reflect in their performance? Like, they're not as proactive, or they're not as cheery.
Oh yeah, you can see that. You pick up on it. Sometimes they're pretty good at it to cover it up.
Yeah, they can be. Very true.
But a lot of it is, and if someone doesn't work for you all the time, but if their supervisor is aware of it, hey, can you keep an eye on so and so? I've noticed this or that. I think that plays a part also.
Yeah.
Jaime.
Absolutely.
Froze up on me.
Yeah, he froze up on me too. All right, you're back. You froze up, Jaime. Whatever you said didn't come through.
Oh yeah.
It must have been great.
It's a good question, but I thought I interrupted you right before we cut off.
Me?
Yeah.
No, I have a question, but go ahead and finish your thought.
Okay, so kind of to capstone that, looking back, Gary, what's one of the most important leadership lessons you've learned the hard way?
Ooh, the hard way? That's a good question.
Or just a good leadership lesson that you've learned that maybe you never practiced earlier on.
Well, a leadership that I learned, and I watched some of the senior sergeants when I started. You got to let people develop. You keep an eye on them. If you show up at a call. I like to be proactive. I'm not proactive, but I didn't like to sit. I couldn't sit in the station, and you can probably ask all the guys they probably thought I was out keeping an eye on them, but I couldn't sit in the station. I like to drive around, and most of the time I got in, and I would handle my stuff most of the time. But if you give them what they need to succeed in their job, you take away their obstacles, but you let them. They might stumble a little bit, and you might have to turn them and guide them the right way. Or they might do something a little bit different than you do or how you would do it. And that's something I've always learned, especially as a training officer, is you can't have that mindset. This is the way it's going to be. This is how you do it.
Sure.
And if you have that, but then you talk to these younger kids now, it's like, why did you do it that way? Because it wouldn't have been the way I did it, but you listen how they think, and their thinking is like, this is why I did it. And how I did it. And this is why I did it. Okay. That makes sense. And you could give your 2 cents, or you could add a little bit to it to make them, a little more solid. But you let them, you let them stumble a little bit. But you help also correct them and get them going the right way, because to me, it's all about career survival. It's a long time to go 30 years. You watch interviews or online, and they talk about IA stuff, and it's like, you never want to go that route and being in trouble. But, these days people can complain or do this or that, but yet we got body cameras now to help us, but if you let them do their police work, and you give them the guidelines, they know the policies, the procedures, you encourage them, you give them an attaboy when it needs to be, or you bring it up in briefing. Hey, so-and-so did a good job today. Tell us about your arrest you did last night, stuff like that. And, you recognize them. And I think that goes a long way to show somebody that, hey, he saw what I did last night. He was happy with what I did.
Right. So I like that you said that. I'm going to add a quick point to that is, and this is something that I'm very transparent about now in my role with our community, is that I'm very honest with them in that our police officers are going to make mistakes. That's a fact.
Yep.
No good officer goes through their career without getting a notice from IA or without getting in trouble. It's a fact. I've never known a good cop to make it through their entire career unscathed, right? Because when you're out being proactive, when you're out doing good work, you're gonna generate a complaint. Even if you're not at fault, you're gonna generate a complaint. It's a fucking fact of our job. Or two, we also have our cops are human beings, right? They bleed, they cry, they smile, they laugh, the whole gambit of emotions. And sometimes our cops that are humans, sometimes they allow their emotions to get the best of them, right? And sometimes they say things that they shouldn't say, or they snap back off of emotion. And we hold them accountable for that. We want the public to know we hold them accountable for that. But we also want the public to know, like, look, we don't employ robots. We want them to be vulnerable. We want them to be sensitive, right? We want them to be, when they go to these domestic violence calls, we don't want them to be assholes all the time. We want them to be empathetic and those type of things. And with that comes the emotion side sometimes, right? So sometimes our cops do mess up, and not out there beating the shit out of people, and not out there doing illegal activities as police officers, but making those simple human mistakes of letting our emotions get the best of us sometimes, saying something that we shouldn't have said sometimes. Maybe they're rude sometimes, and we hold people right to the fire when they do those things. But we also understand as leaders that that's part of being a police officer. That's part of career maturity, right? I'm where I am because I made a lot of mistakes, right? Some that Ryan had to pull me aside and fucking chew my ass out on. You know what I mean? Even as a lieutenant now, sometimes he'll tell me, "Hey, you fucked this up." And you know what I mean? It's part of the job. He's still my good friend, and he's still my boss, and that's how we mature in our career. So I love that point that you made earlier. So I kind of want to touch on that before I turn it over to Ryan.
So Gary, you've had a long storied career, 30 years. Tell me the one thing that you're most proud of, and take out all the headline stuff, the shootings, because you've had a lot of, I'll say, good moments because you save lives. Give me something that is not really talked about that you're most proud of throughout your 30 years.
Well, one thing I always took pride in was I worked traffic on a motor for 7 years between two different times. I always took pride in trying to get a thank you when I gave somebody a ticket. I ran our red light camera thing that we had at the time. I just like to treat people. I always had the idea of if you treat people the way you'd want to be treated, or how you'd want another officer to treat your family member if they had contact with you. That's what you want to you want to instill in people. You said I've been in trouble before, but I've never been never got a paper that I got an IA investigation in 30 years. So, I always took pride in that. But it's to me, you make it to the finish line, and that's the ultimate goal. And you get to go home to your family is the bottom line also, at the end of every shift. So.
Absolutely.
So, Gary, as we begin to wrap up this episode here, I got a question for you. One that we typically ask as we begin to close up our episodes. If you could stand in front of a room of brand new cops, what's one piece of advice that you would give them about full career mentality, career survivability, physically, morally, mentally? What would you say?
Well, it's something I just said also. There's kind of two things, but the first one would be is to treat people how you'd want someone to treat your family member. I said, give them that attention that they need. They called us, to me, don't kiss off a report, that it's a simple report that it's not going to go nowhere. That person called you for a reason. Take the report. I've watched body camera videos, and it's like, you sat there while this guy got his tire stolen, and you watched him put his tire on, and you didn't take a report because he called you because his tire got stolen. You could have wrote the report while you watched him get his tire put back on. It's like you would have made that guy's day. We don't remember all our contacts. We don't remember all our contacts every day, but that person that you contacted is going to remember you for the rest of their life.
Well said.
I mean, that's how I look at it. And, bottom line is, but if you speak to people, if you tell them, my biggest thing was always if it was a scene, I would say, hey, you know what? Hold on, let me handle this, and as soon as I'm done, I'll come talk to you. And it would calm them down. You hear them out. Sometimes people would talk longer than you wanted, but just for them to talk to you for those few minutes, it made them, it's they want to voice their opinion to you. You're there to serve them. Listen to them. So that's one of the biggest things. But and the other one is kind of the normal is do what's right when nobody's watching. Especially now. You got body cameras, you got Teslas that have cameras on cars. You got, it's like there's no reason to do something that you shouldn't do and think you're going to get away with it. It's not worth it.
Right.
I always tell people, look, and one of our detectives at the time, he's a sergeant now. He'd always say, hey, it's just business. It's not personal. Don't, I'm doing my job. Don't get mad at me. You broke the law. You're not going to make my house payment, my car payment, take care of my family because I didn't want to help serve you. So, and I always told another real quick one. I would tell guys, look, if you have to call me as your FTO, a senior officer, a corporal, the sergeant, and say, hey, should I take a report on this? Just take the report. Even if it doesn't go nowhere, take the report. It's so much worth it to make that person happy because that's going to be their experience that they're going to have with a police officer. So
yeah,
great point.
Speaking my language, Gary, we always preach that to cops and treating people right. Like, our cops do a great job, but I do see sometimes like people that want to be gang officers, they're talking to gang members like crap, right? And it's like you really do get more bees with honey than vinegar. And I tell them, if you want to get information like an informant, you got to treat them. You got to play the mind game with them.
Yeah.
Big thing now is body cameras, I think, have helped people how we talk to people and changed how we treat people or our demeanor. But it also shows their demeanor how they treat us too. So it works both. But I was against it. I'll give you that as an old school guy. I'm like, oh, we don't need a camera to show it. I'm like, you know what? It's probably a good idea. Right. We can show what we deal with on a daily basis. So
for sure.
Hope I answered that.
No, I was just when he said the whole body camera thing, I was thinking about the first thought that popped in my head real quick was IA and how many BWCs we watched in IA and how truly shocked I was. And Gary and I've said this several times before, and actually Ryan was there too right before me in internal affairs. I was so shocked when I went into internal affairs at how professional our cops are, how well they speak to people, how well and professional they interact with people, even in the face a lot of times of criticism and aggression and people that are fuck you. And, our cops are still, I was so impressed, man. That's one of the things that I really take away. I'm like, man, our cops, they really, really, there's that 1% that, they screw up and they're gonna be held accountable, but
it's a good feeling to watch that video and go, man,
very impressive.
And you
very,
tell them,
very, very impressive.
Hey, I watched this video and or I was out on that call. And even I've been on calls and I'm like, hey, you handled that good. I liked how you talked to him. I talked, or the child, or you did this or did that,
and honestly, I'll tell you the struggle actually was how many times, and I've even talked to Ryan about this, how many times I wish that we could let the public see this.
Yeah.
These complaints that come in, and then we could let the public see how our cops actually acted and how the complainant actually acted. I wish the guy our department, most departments will be, painted in a completely different picture. But, I really am proud of the work that our cops do out there. They really do a good job.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So Gary, as we come to a close, I'm going to turn it over to you. Any final parting words for us?
Whew. Well, time went by quick. I can tell you that.
It sure does.
It's a great profession. I got a second chance in my life at it. I always think, man, what would I do? What would I do different? But I always tell people, my job would be boring if everybody obeyed the law. Our job we'd be bored out of our mind. I guarantee you guys being proactive guys, but that's what we look for. We look stuff out of the ordinary. We look stuff that doesn't look right. Man, it just, and it's sad because we do that in our days off too. We're looking at that stuff. That's one of the things I'm trying to deal with. And I know I sent a video to you, Ryan, recently about that, is when you're off work, you got to change your outlook a little bit and, not be so focused on the negativity of everything we've seen in 20 years, 25, 30 years. That's the tough part. There are good people out there. You can't treat everybody, that they're the bad guy or they're trying to hurt you. But it's a great profession. It sucks because I know a lot of people don't really want to get into it now, and it's harder, especially when they start seeing the news where a guy was killed or this, it's like, man, you're why would you want to go into a profession like that? Like I said earlier, why would you want to do something that, man, I could die today, If I wouldn't have been 2 inches, if I would have been taller and ducked, I still would have took the shot, or got hit, things like that. It's like, but you can't think about stuff like that. So, but I wouldn't change it for the world, what I've done or what I've been through. So, but
Thanks for being on, Gary.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Jaime, you have some closing words for us?
Yeah, just real quick closing words. Man, what a very illustrious background, Gary, and for having to be an officer in a department that's experienced a lot of tragedy like you have, and been involved in several critical incidents in your multiple years there. A lesser person would look at something like that, right? And having experienced the death of two people that you're close with, a lot of people would be like, fuck this, fuck the world, everybody, it's us versus them, right? Yeah. It's police versus everybody else. And we know how dangerous that could be. But one of the recurring things that you've kept saying this whole podcast, especially toward the end, is treat people with respect. Do what's right. You just said do what's right, even when no one's watching, and that is exactly what I wish the world would know. Is even when there's the ugly out there, the evil, the bad people that we deal with, right? The trauma that these people have put you through in your career, right? These evil people, your outlook is that. Treat people with respect. Somebody lesser would be jaded, like you just talked about, right? Like not being jaded, not letting these things affect you, and to go through
I'm jaded a little bit, I'm sure. So.
Oh, I I think admittedly most of us are, but not to the point where it's so negative, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But to still have an outlook after these many years, right? It gives people like myself hope that there's still amazing people out there that they were good people before they're cops, and they're good people after they're cops. So that was the point that really resonated with me, was treat people with respect, especially after they've been through it. Treat people with respect.
We lost you again. That must have been another nugget that we'll never hear again.
Oh man, which part did you lose me at?
No, it's the very end, like literally the last few words.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, thanks for having that outlook after so many years, Gary. And obviously, El Monte Police Department is very blessed to have someone so experienced and just a good human like yourself. So, thank you, and thank you for being on our podcast. Right?
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, Gary. Just now, when you were talking about how, like, the what ifs, like, what if I had not taken a knee and the round went over your head? But what I immediately thought of is, what if you had quit after you had been fired from your first police job? What if El Monte had not given you a chance? Would that little kid had died in the SWAT incident? I think about things like that. So it's just crazy to think about after 30 years. I've known you for I think I joined AB 109 in 2016, 2017. So since then, and I've always known you to be a hard worker, just a good guy, which is why I gravitated towards you. I always gravitate towards just good people. But one thing I didn't know about you was how into wellness you are and looking after the troops. I mean, you talked about looking at warning signs and referring people to counseling. And I mentioned how we were proud to have you as a listener to this. But man, you're like the real deal, and you're the kind of people that we reach out to and we want as guests. You're the kind of people on the sergeant level, especially, it's going to make a difference and possibly save somebody's life. So I didn't know you were that much into it and that much hyper aware on it. So thank you for that. It's been a pleasure to have you. You've had an amazing career, and I know you're literally at the tail end. I will get you a challenge coin, and if you don't invite me and Jaime to your retirement party,
Yes,
I would be that'd be sad.
Hopefully I'll see you before that, but yes.
Good. Oh, for sure. I got your challenge coin, which I forgot about. I'll get it to you. Well, all right, Jaime.
Yeah. With that, thank you to our special guest, Sergeant Gary Gall from the Monte Police Department. This concludes season 3, episode 11 of Whiskey and War Stories. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcast. And with that, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Gary, for a great podcast. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.